Welcome back to Estate Planning Nightmares and How to Avoid Them. I'm your host, John Braddock, author of Click Here When I Die and the founder of My Life and Wishes, the Legacy Vault, which is an online platform and document storage solution created to make things easier for those that you love. Today is one of those episodes that beautifully blends, I believe, innovation, legacy, and meaning, something that I think every listener wants to explore. We've all thought about what it means to honor a life well lived. We think about stories, heirlooms, memories, but what about literally sending a loved one's legacy beyond Earth? That's exactly what today's guest is working to make possible. Joining us is Ryan Mitchell, an aerospace engineer, founder of Space Beyond, and the creator of Ashes to Space, a revolutionary way to memorialize lives by sending them into orbit in a way that's personal, meaningful, and surprisingly accessible. They've been featured by TechCrunch, CBS News, Fox News, and Space News. Ryan has spent decades working in aerospace, from NASA's Space Shuttle program to nearly 10 years at Blue Origin. And now he's applying that experience to give families a new option for remembrance that reaches beyond Earth itself. Hey, Ryan, welcome to the show.
Hey, John, it's a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you.
Oh, it's awesome to have you. Hey, we met a couple of weeks ago, and I thought, man, I want to have this guy on the show and talk to him about, I remember as a kid, camping out in the backyard, back before there were all the city lights. And, me and my friends, we just stare up into the stars all night long, and just imagine things. And, as kids, we all, wanted to, oh man, it'd be cool to be an astronaut, right? And so I'm old enough to remember watching Neil Armstrong actually set foot on the moon. But, very few people ever get to go to space. And so what you're doing, really intrigued me greatly about what you're doing. And you're also the only rocket scientist that I've ever met. So I think that's really cool. So I love the idea, but uh, most people, I think, have never heard of this. Can you tell us what inspired you to start Space Beyond and the Ashes to Space program?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny you said that you enjoyed laying out and looking at the stars as a kid. It's getting harder and harder with cities growing. Night sky is a little brighter than it used to be, but part of the inspiration for this came a couple years ago when my family and I were camping at a state park nearby. It's a dark sky state park. So the stars are brilliant, and we were laying out. I was actually just laying out with the kids watching the stars, and it seemed like every um, there was always a satellite in view somewhere in the sky. And it was really exciting to me because for years I've been looking up at the sky and trying to spot satellites. In the city, you don't get to see so many of them, but out in the dark night sky, they were everywhere. And so we would watch one go across, and then that would be gone, and another one would come across, and it was just awesome. And that started me thinking that there are more and more satellites now. It's getting easier to access space, to send things to space. The cost is coming down. And that was part of the inspiration for creating the company. The other part of it came from a time when I was watching a family member's ashes being scattered at sea. Um, it was a good moment. It was a good closure for everybody that was involved. But then afterwards, I started thinking, like, is there some other way we could do this? Is there some way that I can make this better? And those two things combined in my head at some point to come up with the idea that maybe I could actually launch Ashes to space. And that was really the beginning of it all.
Wow, that's fantastic. Yeah, I've had a loved one, my uncle, after he had passed. We were originally from the New Jersey area, and he had a place down near Long Beach Island. And we scattered some of his ashes into the canal that goes out into the bay and then the Atlantic Ocean. And I thought, well, that's really cool. It's kind of what he hopefully wanted, but it's like now the ashes are gone, and like there's no way, where'd they go? They wash up on a beach? Did they go somewhere else? So you just never know about it again. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that, because something that you all do really intrigues me. But uh, before we talk about the mechanics, can you help listeners understand what this service feels like? What does it mean emotionally or symbolically for families?
Yeah. So think about like what you're talking about, the scattering at sea. In a way, you can always feel that presence of your lost loved one whenever you look at the sea or any body of water. But that's also a little bit limited because it's only relevant when you're by the sea. Whereas if you've got your loved one in space, you've always got space there with you. You always have the ability to look up and feel their presence. So, imagine being able to walk out in your backyard at night and look up at the night sky and know that they're up there. Wherever you are in the world, whatever time of day, whatever it is, you can feel that presence. And that's exactly what we're attempting to create for our clients.
I love that. I love that. Um, so you've worked in, for NASA and Blue Origin. So, I mean, seriously, you have a heavy aerospace pedigree. So, how did that influence the way you think now versus then about space access, right? And then, of course, this specific service.
Yeah. So I actually started my career after college working on the Space Shuttle program in the time frame of the Columbia disaster. So, you know, Shuttle was a very mature program at that time. They had been flying for many years and they just suffered the second catastrophic flight of the program, lost another 7 crew members. It was a horrible time. That period was marked by, let's say, extreme conservatism. They were making sure that everything was working the way that it was supposed to. And that's where I cut my teeth as a professional, is learning how to do things the right way. But the corollary to that is it becomes incredibly difficult and incredibly expensive to send anybody to space. Shuttle was extremely expensive on a per person basis. Because of that, it was eventually retired and replaced. And there's been a lot of developments over the last 20 something years in space. The cost has come down significantly. Companies like Blue Origin and SpaceX are doing phenomenal things at reducing the cost of accessing space, both for humans and satellites. Um, but even so, it's still nearly impossible for everyday people to be able to access, interact with space in some sort of affordable and accessible way. New Shepard, the program, the suborbital flight program that Blue Origin has, is an awesome program that has made that has really reduced the barriers of accessing space and has opened it up to a lot of people that otherwise would not have been able to go to space. You'll see things like business owners and entrepreneurs. You're also seeing people from all sorts of countries being able to go there, all backgrounds of life. And in fact, I believe it was their most recent flight, or maybe the one before that, they flew the first wheelchair user to space. So, if you think back to the early days of human space flight and the right stuff and the test pilots and all the things that were going on, all of the astronauts were young, physically fit, military, and they fit a very specific um, subset of humanity that were able to go through this process and be able to do that. It was a very difficult and honestly expensive and dangerous um, adventure. And so now it's gotten to the point where sort of regular-ish people can do it, but there's still generally high net worth individuals, people that can afford hundreds of thousands or perhaps even millions of dollars to go to space. And because of that, most of us, myself included, will never be able to afford that in our lifetimes. It's just out of our reach. And um, that's part of why I created this, was to take that next step and make it possible for everybody else to do something meaningful with space.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned, the cost, right, has come down significantly, but and I don't know what the numbers are, and I'd never, quote, you know, uh, Blue Origin or anything else. But like you say, high net worth individuals, sure, if they want to go to space, they might have. But the average, I mean, personally, I don't have the ability to write a $750,000 check for a 15-minute ride, right? And so this is a way that I may never get to space, but maybe part of me can, right? That's really
Yeah,
cool.
it's a $750,000 or whatever number it is. I don't know. It's a pretty big check for a very life-changing 15-minute ride for sure. But yeah, it really is to the point where, let's say, 99% or more of us are unable to do so still. This service, Ashes to Space, creates a way that everybody else can do so without breaking the bank. It's not free, but it's not to the point where it becomes painful to be able to participate.
Right. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Um, but you know, don't tune out, folks, because this proposition is not millions of dollars. It's not hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's not tens of thousands of dollars. And when you hear the price point, this makes this accessible literally to everybody. But before we jump to that, walk us through, right? So because I asked you the same question, you were telling about this, and I was like, how does it work? How does it work? Right. So can you walk us through the process, like start to finish? So, John Braddock says, Ryan, dude, I am in. I want to honor a loved one. What happens next? What's the process?
Yeah. So it's actually pretty straightforward. Um, Anybody that is interested in this can go to our website, go to the shop, select the service, and check out. It's pretty straightforward. Once that's done, our team will actually ship this little box to you. This includes everything that you need to prepare the celestial tribute, meaning the small symbolic portion of the ashes. Inside the box is instructions, a QR code that links to a website with instructions, video instructions, and I'm looking at the camera here. So a little vial to collect the ashes in, a funnel, and a spoon to help with that. It is a small amount, about a gram worth of ashes that we're flying. Um, Anyways,
We're not
once
going to send a
you
5-pound box. Yeah.
exactly. I think we'll talk about that in a few minutes. This becomes an important part of it. But anyways, once the family has prepared the ashes, they send them back to us. We receive them, hold them in secure storage. Meanwhile, we are preparing the spacecraft for flight. I actually have a low fidelity prototype here that will demonstrate what the spacecraft looks like. So it is a cube. It's about 4 inches cubed, and inside it's hollow. We will then integrate all of the ashes into the spacecraft, seal it for flight, and take it to the launch integrator where it will be certified for flight, make sure that it's structurally intact and everything is meets all the requirements necessary to fly. They then integrate that onto the launch vehicle, which in this case is a SpaceX Falcon 9, and SpaceX launches it to space. They deploy the little satellite on orbit and tell us exactly where they dropped it off, the initial orbital parameters, it's called. We register that with the federal government, basically, is what it comes down to. It's a um, Space Force run tracking service that tracks everything in orbit, which then provides data to all of us on where the spacecraft is. So while it's on orbit, the radars and whatever else that are involved in tracking spacecraft are occasionally pinging our spacecraft to make sure that it is where they believe it should be. And when they um, keep track of it and update it, we always know where it is. There are tons of tracking services out there. We make it easy for our clients to connect to one of those and be able to track the satellite while it's in orbit.
Well, so
It,
let me jump in, because what's cool about that, and what I think I hear you saying is this. So, like on my smartphone, I have a couple of because I've always been interested in space and the stars. So I have a couple of the star apps on it. So I live way up in North Scottsdale, Arizona, about 2,600 feet. Everything in North Scottsdale, Arizona, requires down lighting, so there aren't big street lights and things. Houses, they all have to be
nice.
down, so you can see the star. And so I'll sit out in the back and say, God, I can't remember what that constellation was. I can pull out the app, I can see it. So you have the ability to track this and their services. So I'd literally be able to like be outside and know the approximate time and be like, mom or dad or whomever, they're passing over right now.
Yes.
Wow.
Our satellite is pretty small. I don't believe we'll be able to see it with our naked eyes, but we will be able to track it with the smartphone. Yes.
That's really cool.
The
Because
neat
unlike
thing
the
of
ashes in the ocean, which are wherever, we can look at
right.
water, but it's not there. I just think it's really intriguing to think that, okay, I'm knowing that, sometime during this 30-minute period, as I'm standing outside, that satellite is, or spacecraft is passing over.
Yes. And a neat thing about our orbit is we go into what's called sun synchronous orbit. So as the Earth is spinning, I should get an Earth model. But as the Earth is spinning, our spacecraft is cycling over it, orbiting over it, over the poles, so the North Pole and the South Pole. Meanwhile, the Earth is spinning underneath, right? And so um, every so many days, the spacecraft covers the entire globe. And whenever it passes over a particular point, so for example, your home in North Scottsdale, Arizona, it will be at a certain time, a solar time, not necessarily clock time, but a certain solar time. And every time it comes back, will be at about that same solar time, which is really cool. It won't be every day at, let's say, 2:30 in the afternoon or 2:30 at night or whatever it is, but maybe once a week or every 10 days or so, it'll come by at about 2:30, which is really neat.
Wow. I love that. That's really cool. So, we talk about the practical limits, right? The amount of ashes, and for those that are watching, on the video format, Ryan shared the vial is small. It's about a gram or so ashes. Now, I've seen uh, ashes of a deceased person when they've come back from cremation, and it's a big box, and it weighs what, 4 or 5 pounds. I don't know. Um, so obviously, there's some practical limits here, right? On why it's a small portion.
Yeah. So, as I mentioned earlier, even though costs have come down precipitously over the last 20 years, launching anything to space is still incredibly difficult and expensive. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars to build and launch a satellite to space. To be able to send, for example, the entire quantity of somebody's cremated remains would be prohibitively expensive for most of us. So we're making it possible for a lot of people to send a small amount for a small cost by limiting the amount that everybody is sending it. It's actually pretty standard in this industry to limit the amount that's sent to about a gram. There are others that have been doing this for a long time, and I believe they use similar size amounts. To my knowledge, nobody is launching the entire quantity to space.
Yeah, I think that would be fairly cost prohibitive. Um, so some of the older models that were out there, and forgive me, I know nothing about the industry, right? Um, but what I like is so yours are gathered, they're contained, they're put into the cube, the spacecraft, which remains intact. So it's not like all of a sudden, there's this big black cloud of ashes floating around out there. So I think that's very, environmentally awesome. Did older versions, did they like just let ashes float out into space?
I don't believe so. So
Okay.
they we need to be good stewards of the space in space. It is vast. It is very open, but at the same time, everything that's in space is moving around at very high speeds, somewhere around 25,000 miles per hour. So if two things run into each other at 25,000 miles per hour, it's disastrous. And so it's important to maintain distance between satellites, between everything that's on orbit. And in order to sort of respect that, we need to stay contained and we need to limit the amount of time that we stay on orbit. So basically keeping the space highways, if you will, clear for future spacecraft. Releasing the ashes in space actually on orbit would be potentially disastrous. It would create this big cloud of orbiting debris, if you will, dust that could impact anything else that happens to be in the area. So we actually go through great pains to make sure that everything stays contained for the duration of the flight. That said, when the spacecraft eventually slows enough that it's no longer able to sustain its orbit, it re enters the atmosphere. So it's constantly slowing a little bit while it's orbiting because they're even up in space, in Earth orbit, there's a minute amount of air that's still up there. So every once in a while, one molecule of something impacts the spacecraft and slows it down infinitesimally. And over so many days, months, years of doing that, it slows down to the point where it starts to lower its orbit closer and closer to the atmosphere until one day it it no longer makes it around the planet, basically. It slows down more and more and enters the atmosphere. It gets denser, it slows down faster and faster to the point where it actually um, glows red hot and vaporizes like a shooting star, to be honest, right? So that's really what shooting stars are spacecraft or meteorites entering the atmosphere and vaporizing because of that friction, that heating of the atmosphere. There are some others that are operating in this space, so to speak. Some pretty cool companies actually. And what they do is they take actually all the ashes or however much as you want, and will fly it into the upper atmosphere on a weather balloon. So it looks like space in the video. It's very high, higher than most airplanes will fly, but it's not really orbiting space. It doesn't have the velocity to maintain that altitude. It's only held up there by the balloon, and they get up to altitude and they release the ashes in the atmosphere and they scatter them is really what it comes down to, kind of like somebody scattering ashes out of an airplane or something, but just much higher. And that's a really neat model as well.
Very interesting. So, um, let me ask you this question: Have so you've started a company about a year or so ago, really taken off. Getting a lot of media, which is awesome. Have families who have signed up for the service, have they shared stories with you yet about why this matters to them, or are there any like anecdotes that have like stuck with you?
Yeah, it's a very fulfilling part of this journey is to be able to hear from so many clients. I'm working with dozens right now and soon to be hundreds or thousands of them, and I love that. I love to hear back from them what's going on, why this means something to them. A few stories that stick to me is one is from a woman named Shirley in Texas. Her husband was a test pilot for the Navy, or not a pilot, sorry, a test parachutist for the Navy. many years ago. Literally before his work, the parachutes were all those regular circle kind of parachutes that you'd see in World War II. And he was one of the ones that were flying the early parafoil type ones, the modern type of parachutes. And that group in the Navy were is called the shooting stars, like parachuting, shooting stars. So he spent years parachuting and testing these parachutes. He actually taught the Gemini pilots how to fly their parachutes and how to maneuver and things like that. So he's got some really neat pictures she sent me. Um, and he worked for many years at Johnson Space Center as an engineer, I believe. Anyway, so he's on our flight, and that's a really great honor. She's particularly moved by this because of the imagery, the vision of him becoming a shooting star again at the end of the orbital journey. So I love that story. I've heard several stories from people that have had their ashes, their loved ones' ashes, sitting on the shelf or in the closet for years, and they weren't really sure what to do with them. And this is providing that thing for them to, um, you know, honor and remember their loved one, and perhaps even to then let go of the remainder. We're only flying a small portion of it. They've been looking for something to do with it, and I've had several other touching stories of people that lost young children or even unborn children, things like that. They're it, this may well become the most important and meaningful thing I've ever done in my life is giving these people an opportunity to honor their loved ones.
I love that. Very heartfelt. And yet, the other thing I like about the small portion, because they do. I know several people that have, box ashes of a spouse, of a child, and they're at home. It's on the bookshelf. God forbid it ends up in a closet. But by taking a small piece, you can make that tribute, and then you can still scatter the ashes at sea or on your
Mhm.
favorite hiking trail or a portion there. Heck, you can use it as compost and plant a tree in your backyard. Um,
Absolutely.
but this is just so unique
I've learned a
from
lot
that
about
aspect.
this. I'm an outsider to the industry, but I've definitely been learning this year on all the different options for ashes. There's so many neat choices. Actually, I've just recently been exploring jewelry. There's keepsake jewelry you can make with small portions of the ashes. I've learned about people getting tattoos with ink that's infused with small remnants, I suppose. I don't know exactly how the process works, but there's really so many cool things to do other than just leave it on the shelf, right? Um,
Yeah.
I think the story that I keep hearing is when they first when they first lost their spouse or parent or whatever it was, um, having the ashes close felt comforting. Like here they are, right? They're with me. They're in the house on the side table of the bed or whatever the case may be. But then years go by and that feeling starts to evolve, right? Everybody's going through their grief cycle in some sort of their own path, and then at some point they're ready to move on in some way that feels right to them, but they don't know exactly what that right way is. And for some people, it's easy. You just take them to the ocean and scatter at sea or at the park or in the backyard, like you mentioned. Like there's so many things, but that doesn't really fit for everybody. There are some people that are looking for something else that's more significant or meaningful. And maybe they're not entirely ready to let go yet of everything. So I don't know exactly how many people that is or what portion of the population that is, but I know there's some people out there that this is going to be the right thing for them.
Absolutely. And again, and still have all the other options. I mean, you get to that point, it's like a little bit goes to space. We're gonna make some jewelry, which I've heard about. Tattoos a new one. I hadn't heard that one yet, but hey, why not have the tattoo done? And there's still plenty to scatter other
Yep.
places. Um, so here's a question: are there misconceptions that you've heard about, or people said about space memorials that like kind of surprise you?
There are some really interesting things on the internet if you go out and search for them. The internet can be scary at times. There was a mission last year that Celestis was flying where they attempted to bring back the ashes from space. So they sent people up and they were supposed to stay up for amount of time and then come back. There was a malfunction on that spacecraft during reentry, and they were unable to recover the the folks' ashes. Um, so they ended up, I think, crashing into the ocean or something to that effect. And that's, honestly, that's okay, right? It's the small portions of everybody's cremains, and they've basically scattered at sea. That's pretty much what happened. But the internet took it and ran with it. And there's these really odd AI generated images out there of like a space shuttle crashing into the ocean and 160 coffins floating out of it. And they're, clear coffins. It's a really odd looking thing. And that's spurred a whole bunch of misconception on what the idea of flying somebody's ashes to space is, right? Even the concept of space burial is a misnomer. We're not burying the person in space. We're not even sending the entire um, cremation, quantity of cremains up there. It's very much misconstrued in some ways. I think that the reality of it is much more palatable than what some people consider.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And it's interesting because you know a traditional funeral, um, just for taking care of the funeral home, with a a burial and the casket, and the right pillows, and the vault, and all that kind of stuff. I mean, yeah, that piece is going to be 15,000 at a on the low end, right? Uh, Cremation, depending on where it's done, um, you know, 5,000, maybe a little less, maybe a little more, depending on where it is. And that's really those two choices beyond aquamation and natural organic reduction, but they all have a price tag, right? And
Mhm.
so if someone's looking and someone has passed, and I can't afford a funeral and I don't want to clutter the ground, so we're going to do cremation. We're going to spend like 3 grand or 5 grand, whatever it is. um, Tell me how much it would cost me to send a gram, or if I want to actually pre-do this for myself, and hopefully it doesn't happen for a long time. So am I talking to spending 5 grand?
If you were to go with some of the other providers in the space, yes. But with our service, we're able to do it for only $249. So wildly different.
Wow. So let me just say that one more time. Your program, people can send their ashes to space for how much?
$249.
I love it. You have, my friend, you have made space travel affordable for everybody. It's just, I might not really, because I don't know what afterlife is like, but at least I'm going to get to space for under
Yeah,
$250. For less than the American Express card charges you for the annual fee to have the privilege of holding the card.
I hadn't thought about it that way. Yes.
That's so amazing. That is
You
so
know,
amazing.
I, I set out from the beginning to make something that everybody could afford, something that if somebody wants to do it, they can do it without having to go hungry or break the bank. Something that every American household can do. And it struck home actually about a month ago. I was at Walmart and walking through the TV section, a medium sized, regular TV that pretty much every household has is $249. So that's really a good indicator that we're priced at the point where everybody can do it.
I love that. Yeah, and that's when we created our legacy vault for people, the main thing was we had to make it affordable. And so there's numerous ways for people to get our platform, but if they come to us direct to consumer, it's $129. It's an annual subscription, but it's less than a cup of coffee a day, right? One less Starbucks a week covers that. But I like the way you've thought about that and really making it affordable. So tell me about big picture. Like, so you're literally putting memorials beyond Earth. Um, where do you see this going in the next 10 years, the next decade? And what do you want, what are you really looking at your legacy to be? As this evolves and changing the way other people think about legacy.
There are a humongous amount of people within the United States that have cremains sitting in their households. A good portion of them will continue doing that and never look back. Some of them will plan to scatter them at sea or in a garden or whatever it is that is meaningful to them. But a good portion of them as well don't know what they're going to do with them. And so these millions of people that are out there are looking for something. My intention is that they will look at space as being accessible, something that they can attain, something that they can interact with. And I think that will be the biggest net change that I could bring to the world is to raise an entire generation of Americans, of people that believe that they can be part of space as well, and that it's not just for the professional astronauts or the rich and famous or things like that. Just regular, everyday folks, salt of the earth people can be part of this, you know, eternal cosmos, this grand space adventure that's out there, this new space age that's really just starting. And this is their chance. This is our chance, to be honest, to be part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, for those that do, and millions of people have cremains at home, and they might never want to part with those. And the beauty of this is they don't have to. They can still keep those at home or decide what they're going to do in the future. But for $250 to take a gram and send it to space, so you have another way to honor and tribute. I just think that's a really cool legacy, and kudos to you for what you're doing, what you built from your space background with NASA and Blue Origin, and looking at it differently and saying here's something that we can do for the average person. I think it's a beautiful thing.
You know, every time I talk to somebody new about this, they say something like, "Wow, that's incredible. I didn't think that was even possible." And to me, success in the future would be to talk to a random person at a restaurant or on the street, and they think that space is just there and accessible to them, right? It's just something that's there that is part of life, like the ocean, right? Instead of it being something that is unattainable. So small changes now, perhaps precipitating large changes in the future.
I love it. Hey Ryan, this has been wildly insightful. From engineering to empathy, from space technology to human connection. What you're building doesn't just push rockets into orbit; it expands, I think, how we're all going to think about memory, about meaning, about how we honor the people that we love. So I encourage our listeners, if this has moved you, challenged you, or made you think a little bit differently about legacy, or think about legacy in a new way, share it, pass it on, and explore the resources at ashestospace.com. I will put Ryan's contact information in the show notes, as well as a link so you can go out and check it out. The website's amazing. blew me away, which is why after I met Ryan, looked at it, I said, even though the show is called Estate Planning Nightmares, I love happy stories, and I thought it was important to bring this to you all in my community. So, Ryan, thank you. God bless you, brother, for joining us on the show today.
So it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. And we'll be watching your journey and maybe looking up at the stars differently because of it. So, as always, folks, your life is your legacy. So, plan ahead and make it a great day.